Clemson is currently at war with its own history. It's not a very publicized one, and often the school leans towards the softer side of history while choosing to gloss over what really went on. However, it is important that there have been multiple outcries from the community to fix this, because it means that change is coming, and soon enough the school may be educating everyone on what went on before Clemson was Clemson. I studied the plaque standing in front of Fort Hill. It looks good and is a nice little blurb that describes what the house was. That being said, it is shockingly short and vague. The sign casually states, 139 enslaved African Americans worked the plantation, and African Americans continued to be a vital force in Fort Hill operations until Mr. Clemson's death in 1888. That's it. That's the extent to which the sign mentions the African Americans who built, worked, and made the plantation successful. On this land, slaves were held against their will, whipped, and beaten so that they would work for the land or take care of the family. Yet all that is mentioned on the plaque is the endeavors of Mr. Clemson and his family. There's another line that says, the vision that led to the founding of Clemson was made possible by Fort Hill. While it's understandable trying to use ethos, pathos, and logos to make Mr. Clemson, the man who devoted his land to making a school, seem like an incredible person, it's ignorant to simply look past the fact that he ran a slave plantation. Can anyone tell the full story if 90% of the pages are torn out? After researching what happened here, it was upsetting how little information they put on the plaque. So many names and faces lost in the archives that people won't learn about, but were so vital to the success of Fort Hill. Even on the Clemson website, they use language that makes it seem as if times were good and slavery wasn't a big deal. They offer the perspective of a reporter who visited the plantation in 1849. He specifically mentions all of the good things going on, like a wedding between two slaves, and some slaves who had even earned the right and could grow and harvest their own cotton after the day of work in the fields was done. Not one line from Clemson's article did they condemn what happened there, and they even said such things as, other documents record the lives of slaves who were more inclined to conform to the status quo. It baffled me how much positive was said about the lives of the slaves while casually dropping things like, he was jailed for 10 days and given 30 lashes in order to prevent a repetition. Even this watered-down information had to be researched before discovering it, so let's look back at the plaque itself. Mr. Clemson's credibility is emphasized by using language such as a high seminary of learning or Mr. Clemson eloquently described. Clearly this was a very bright man who cared very much about the education of others, but to what extent does that forgive the crimes of the past? Pathos is also present, specifically when the plaque states, after the death of his wife and children, with no living heirs, Thomas Green Clemson bequeathed his estate to the state. By bringing this up, I am in no way taking away from a truly devastating moment in Mr. Clemson's life. I simply want to ask again, to what extent does that forgive the crimes of the past? How many slaves died working the plantation, or at the very least had their lives taken away by being forced into slavery for the majority of their years? Did Mr. Clemson offer a major contribution to the lives of thousands by donating the land that became Clemson University? Yes. However, the school cannot continue to close one eye and simply ignore the much more horrific side of history that was slavery at Fort Hill Plantation.